Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another AGE Pro Team Deck Tech. This time I'm here with Andrew Rudin, my friend and colleague from the AGE Pro Team, and we're doing something a little bit different. We're doing a Blitz Deck Tech because we are right in the middle of Skirmish season. There's one weekend left, and Andrew feels like he's found a bit of an edge with a hero that hasn't been making a whole lot of waves. Andrew, talk to me about what you've discovered.
Yeah, so I've been messing around with Enigma New Moon. And this is the main reason I wanted to play the deck. I've had this for a while, a little bit after release of Part the Misfail. So I was like, you know what, Skirmish season's finally here. I get to actually play the deck for once. Let's explore it and see what we can do.
And Andrew, you are no stranger to the illusionist class. Some of your best results have been put up with Old Prism, Sculptor of Arclight. Tell me about your relationship to this class specifically, and how it relates to the way you got into the game.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of illusionists. I like playing instant speed stuff. In general, having the option to play on both turns has always been interesting to me. And the unique interactions that illusionists kind of change the way you play Flesh and Blood is also very interesting to me.
Yeah, it kind of breaks the core tenets of the game, doesn't it?
Yeah. Spectra is always like it. It's nice. What I like about it is that it presents like like damned if you do, damned if you don't type of moments. So, Spectra's nice for that. Ward has been able to present that in a little bit, or in a little bit of ways. And then, before that we had Dromai and the Dragons. Also, I think it leaned more towards the Spectra side than the Ward side, but in the middle, it was like in the middle where it can absorb life, but in sometimes inefficient ways for certain heroes.
Mm-hmm. And so, Andrew, even though you are kind of an illusionist specialist, it's important to note that you have done incredibly well at the the AGE Open Series this year. You are in and qualified for the Players Championship, and not only that, you've done it with I want to say like 4 or 5 top 8s at this point, all on different heroes. So even though you really like playing illusionist, it seems you can make any class work.
I do love exploring different ways to tackle the meta. More importantly, and the one thing I don't like is playing mirror matchups. So the last thing I want to do in any class. So the last thing I want to do is to play the most represented hero. And in these open series there are repeat players, that you can kind of expect a certain hero from, and for that reason, I've chosen to stay away from certain heroes. I haven't played Enigma as much, the normal one, but stuff like Rhinar and New is very popular, but at the time, I did not expect it to be so. And Max has been just great. So I do love taking all of these different heroes and pushing them towards the forefront.
And Andrew is no stranger to coverage as well. He's been on stream just about every time he's been doing well at one of these AGE Open Series. So I encourage you to go back and look at some of the decks he's been working with. He's a stellar player, and you can learn a lot from him. I know I have. Well, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the deck. Let's see what you're cooking with here, Andrew. This hero, Enigma New Moon, has it was a pretty exciting thing when it was first spoiled. I know I felt like this Skirmish season was going to be littered with Enigma New Moons just because of the amount of hype that it got. However, the representation wasn't really there. Tell me why you were drawn to Enigma New Moon.
I mean, the main thing is the fact that I actually have the Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
But the hero ability is also very interesting. The fact that you can just flip over Ward Piece. So you have the ward on top of the equipment, as well as making 3 spectral shields. So at minimum +4 ward, which in many cases is +4 life.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that protection to help stabilize the game in case someone is trying to blow you out is super fascinating to me, and is super attractive for me to the hero to kind of like turn the game around out of nowhere.
Especially in a format like Blitz, which is notorious for being somewhat degenerate and incredibly quick. It seems like her hero ability, which I should mention, is instant, pitch a chi card, turn target face down equipment you have equipped face up. If it has ward, create 3 spectral shield tokens. And of course, that first static line of text, which says equipment you own get cloaked. So they're equipped face down and not active until you activate that hero ability. It seems like this hero ability kind of flips that whole Blitz dynamic on its head. And I mean, for instance, since we're talking about it, let's go ahead and get into the equipment suite. The one that makes the biggest waves, I think, because of that hero ability is Heirloom of Rabbit Hide. So you don't have to wait until you're down to exactly 1 life. You can still, but you can also just use Enigma's hero ability to flip it. And so you're essentially, for the value of your pitched chi card, your pitched blue, you are getting ward 4 plus 3 spectral shields, which is 7 value on its face. But when you factor in that these are also your weapons and your offensive capability, it can kind of be off the charts.
Exactly, and that is like one of the biggest saving graces for the deck. In case someone is trying to like blow you out, 1 card turns into 7 points of block. Is just so ridiculous.
I guess there is a caveat that we should mention before we go through the rest of the equipment suite. Once you've revealed every single one of your pieces of armor, you essentially don't have have text on your hero anymore. Have you run into any situations where like the game went long enough for that to be relevant?
Yeah, a handful of times it has, but I make up for this by the fact that I run cards like Cosmic Awakening, or there's also Unravel Aggression. I haven't played with that card recently, but Mirror Guy and Cosmic Awakening are like my bigger payoffs for the chi after I transcend. Those cards are so crazy good, especially in a Blitz format. That it's really, really it comes back around for the chi, even though they don't block.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. So before we get too far, I do want to talk about the rest of these ward equipment pieces because ideally, with this hero ability, you're sitting on 4 pieces. All of your pieces ideally have ward, right? And so these are the ones you've chosen. Let's start with the headpiece, Diadem of Dream State.
The main reason that this is in here is because it's War 2 and it's uh just the better option so far. The Ponder token hasn't been I think I've only ever used it once to pay for it because you don't really want to like lose the card. Most of the time you can use like a 4 or 5 card hand with this deck, so paying for the Ponder token has not been relevant, but the War 2 is the best part about it.
And then we, of course, have Wave of Reality in the glove slot. That seemed like the most reasonable option to me. Are there any others you considered?
Yeah, I forget what it's called, but it's the one that it's the Illusionist glove piece that when you can pay 1 to flip it over and give a +1 counter to a target aura you control.
Uphold Tradition.
Uphold Tradition. I tried that card before, and like the thing about that card is like you either pay for it to get the +1 or you flip it over for the Spectral Shields. And I found that you don't really take advantage of +1 counters very well with this deck. So I've opted to play Wave of Reality instead. And in the case that you can defend or you lose the 3 Spectral Shields and this, you still get a Spectral Shield afterwards that you could potentially swing with at the start of your turn.
And the reason you don't make good use of +1/+1 counters is because I'm noticing that you are running 2 different weapons, neither of which are Cosmo. So none of those auras that you're going to be swinging with are going to have go again, whether or not they have a +1/+1 counter. So since we're on the subject, let's go ahead and talk about your weapons. Which of these would you say is main board, Andrew?
Iris for sure.
Hmm.
Iris is main board. I had Reality Refractor because I was thinking uh, conceptually, uh, like, it. Am I going to be in a case where, especially against Zen, where I'm going to just be blocking a lot? I'm stuck with the one card, and I can use that to swing. And if that's the case, more often than not, then Reality Refractor would be better in that scenario. But Iris has so much upside, and you're just running so many blues that like the upside of Iris, uh, if you're given the opportunity, is way better than Iris or Reality Refractor rather.
Hmm. And so, did in your we're going to talk about your matchups and the events that you took this list to, but in either of those events, did you ever find yourself subbing in the Reality Refractor?
I did. I used it once against Riptide.
And how did it go?
It was really good in that scenario because I expected the Riptide to be using traps, and I did not want to be able to. I did not want to turn on the traps in any way because of my weapons are my spectral shields, and in order to protect them, uh, especially from the Riptide ability, I have to not turn on the traps. And there are some traps that he has that he can just turn on, that they just turn on no matter what, like the Crucible traps.
Hmm.
But other than that, everything else, I don't want to like play into it. So if I have 3 spectral shields and I can just swing one, he can use the traps, but like he's not going to do much else with his turn usually. So I can keep the spectral shield, and in case he pings me, I have the other spectral shields to protect it. Um, and that's the main reason why I ran Reality Refractor.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Since we've covered the weapons, there is something. It's a bit of an elephant in the room with this deck. Meridian Pathway in the foot slot is just a little bit clunky, and the reason for that is Meridian Pathway does not have ward unless you've pitched a chi this turn, and unfortunately, I don't think you can kind of flip it and then posthumously give it ward 3 by pitching to the Enigma hero text. What has been your experience using this card?
So as far as I know it, because it does not have natural ward, when you flip it over, it just says like you can just ignore the bottom text. It just says instant pay through tree. You may play an
Mhm.
aura as though it were an instant. So because of that, Enigma New Moon won't see it as a ward piece, and it won't give you the spectral shields. Uh, so in my opinion, it is definitely the worst leg piece for this deck, or the worst piece of equipment rather for this deck. Um, that is until we get Flutter Steps and Rosetta in the next set.
Mhm.
But I've seen other people use like Keikoid leg pieces, and that seems fine. And I don't even think this is necessarily better, but there are scenarios where like uh, my game plan is basically I need to flip over my equipment, and this is usually the first one that gets flipped over because in order to activate it, I need to pitch the chi, and naturally, what am I using the chi for? My hero ability. So I can kind of double up on the ward and kind of protect the piece of equipment I'm flipping over with Meridian Pathways in some instances.
I would imagine it kind of allows you this opportunity that a lot of decks have when they have really solid fridges where you can kind of like take a little bit of damage early and then all of a sudden there's this massive flip turn where you've absorbed an immense amount of damage and kept the majority of your hand to use on offense.
Yeah, that happens quite often.
Awesome. So the only thing we haven't mentioned is Waves of Aquamarine, which doesn't have ward on its own. However, I would imagine you're just trying to use that for tricky shenanigans with cards like Command and Conquer and the Weakest Link in some of your matchups where you have to be a little bit more disruptive.
Yeah, so in a lot of like these aggro type matchups, like Rhinar and Zen, having the ward is nice, but they can force through damage whether you like it or not. And being able to disrupt their turns and slow them down even a little bit makes a huge difference. It goes a long way for the rest of the game because you the ward and the Spectre Shields are nice, but it's not the only win condition you have for the deck.
Absolutely. Okay, so that covers our equipment suite. Talk to me about the core of the deck, Andrew.
Yeah, so I made this deck. I mean, a lot of the regular Enigma lists in CC, a lot of them are running pummels. So I was like, I think it naturally makes sense to run this card in Blitz. It kind of does. It feels more impactful in Blitz because taking the card from hand is always good, but also pushing the extra life is so much more meaningful in Blitz when there's only 20 life.
And also, I would imagine you're not setting off nearly as intensive alarm bells to your opponent when you're holding back 2 cards and a big attack on the chain, because ordinarily, with Enigmas, you can kind of expect, your instant auras or like astral etchings even in this deck. I would imagine it doesn't scream like I'm about to get pummeled like it does when you're facing off with a Guardian.
Usually not. No, usually not. Because when you have those that a hand for it, it's like, oh, I have one resource. It could be a path will travel to give it a go again. I could with a second transcend card to keep it and push for that, or just play out. I could play out Waning Vengeance, and just have extra ward on the board. Stuff like that, where there are multiple ways to sneak the resources you available to you.
Mm-hmm. So pummel and big attacks makes a lot of sense. I am seeing a couple of these things to establish a ward board, shall we say, that we typically see from Enigmas. Talk to me about the aura suite, I guess.
All right, so Waning Vengeance. The thought process there was that since I can in the cases I would use Reality Refractor, I could have Waning Vengeance to just play out a 2-card hand with 1 blue and be able to swing. It's just the most efficient way to do it. But it also is, there's gonna be a lot of blazes. This is kind of like a workaround to Oasis, since I don't think you need Oasis, in my experience. And more ward to swing, and with the upside of giving you a spectral shield. So like if this goes, you lose a weapon, but you also gain a weapon back. Is the safety that I like about it. Astral Etchings plays into all of the ward that you can make, especially spectral shields off of your hero ability, because you can make them so easily and all in one instance so abundantly that this card is basically almost always active. It's really easy to just surprise people with the +3, +1/+1 counters. And especially when you can stack it on like a Mirror Guy.
Mm-hmm.
Mirror Guy is such a funny card because with when people were using it with Cosmo, it was just okay. You'd swing for 4 and that's it. Or on the low end, swing for 4 and then high end swing for 8. But with Iris of Reality, you're actually swinging for 6 or 8. So the floor is a lot higher with Mirror Guy, and then adding Astral Etchings on top of it to push it over the edge, in case you don't have the chi. Kind of makes that card so much better.
Yeah, absolutely. And it, in a way, with the Iris build, kind of makes it like a little less clunky resource wise, because, I mean, if you wanted to establish a Mirror Guy, and that's all you wanted to do for your turn with Cosmo, it's like, yeah, I can establish it, but then I have to pitch a whole nother card to swing with it. If I'm not ready with a Tunic resource or something like that. With Iris, it kind of like makes it a little more honest, I guess I should say, because it's like pitch the blue or the chi card to establish the manifestation, and then you pitch a whole nother card to be swinging with Iris. Yeah. So I would just imagine that resource structure just feels a little less awkward.
Yeah, for sure.
That's great. And then let's go ahead and chat about some of the more defensive things that you have in your list. It looks like we have a lot of zero cost things we can throw out on defense, I would imagine, as a way to transcend nice and early and efficiently. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so in my mind, because the format is so fast, I just want to transcend as quickly as possible. So I run every transcend card. The only card that's not in there that's in the sideboard is the Sacred Art because it can be awkward to play out. Um, but other than that, all the other ones are zero cost. So I want as many ways to activate these cards as possible. So I have Hold the Line, which makes a lot of sense for brutes and ninjas. Art of War and Blood Rush. That naturally kind of fits into it. And if not, zero block 2 is fine. But I get to transcend and get extra ward to protect myself anyway. And then Moon Chakra is just. I mean, I'm a fan of all the chakras in all classes. I think they are so good. And they really do play well to the classes. What you want to do with the class. Moon Chakra is just so perfect for that. Prevent 3 damage, zero cost, easy to transcend with. Uh, it's defensive, helps protect your ward pieces. So that card to me is just like one of the perfect cards for Enigma.
And you mentioned zero block 2 being fine in Hold the Line as a floor. We've got another card that is fairly low to the ground as far as block value goes. Is Sink Below in the blue in here just to be a transcend enabler?
It is partly that, and it also just the hand filtering is always nice. You can. There are times where you find yourself, oh, maybe because there are a lot of blues in this deck, and it'd be like, oh, it's fine to have the blues. You can transcend, you can use them to swing all your spectral shields or whatever ward pieces you have. But it also would be nice to be like, oh, maybe I could use this to find a disruptive piece, like if I'm playing Zen and Amnesia, a Weakest Link, CNC to help kind of push the threat, as it were. Um, and if you don't and you find another blue, you're totally fine with that too. So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Since we've kind of covered the core, let's go into our inventory. You mentioned some sideboard slots devoted mainly to what is probably the biggest boogeyman for this deck, Zen. I would imagine Amnesia is there for him and pretty much for him alone. Yeah.
yeah, pretty much. It's just a Zen card. I want to stop all of his combo pieces. And this is like the perfect card for that. Any way to try to slow down his game plan is the best way you can deal with that deck.
Which makes a lot of sense. But Andrew, at the time that we are recording this, we've received some big news. I think your boogeyman is gone. Am I mistaken?
I am very happy to announce that, or LSS is happy to announce that Zen has crossed the LL finish line. So he will no longer be a force that we need to worry about. On top of that, there's also Rhinar and Briar and Dash. So that's a lot of aggro decks that have rotated out. So that gives us a lot more room for this deck to mess around with and play with. And it probably changes the deck a lot, to be honest.
And that's amazing because let's go ahead and take a look at your matchups from these 2 skirmishes you attended. Number 1 is going to be at Odyssey Games in Pasadena. I want to note before we get into the nitty gritty of the matchups, in both the Odyssey Games skirmish and also the skirmish at the Light, you made top 8 and then immediately lost quarterfinals to none other than Zen. But Ding Dong the Witch is dead. That's no longer something you have to contend with. So we'll go through your matchups, and then we have the really interesting pleasure of being able to retool this deck live based on what you expect to see this coming weekend. But anyway, yeah. So let's go to Odyssey Games in Pasadena. Walk me through how your day went, Andrew.
It was good. I for that event, I just woke up and drove straight there, and was not trying to give myself like a great morning. I was like, oh, it's time to go play Flesh and Blood. Uh, and right when I get there, things are good, vibes are cool. There was a lot more players than I think we all had expected at the time. But yeah, I get my first round into Dromai. Very, it's gonna be naturally a tough matchup because they're, the red line Dromai where you can just go full aggro can be kind of tough to deal with, especially when they're pairing it with dragons. And the biggest advantage that Dromai has is actually burn them all. This deck in general does not deal with arcane damage very well, um, because if you want to include AB equipment, you have to pay 3 resources to flip it over. So it's just not efficient at all to run AB. That's why I chose not to include it at all. I know there are other people out there who are doing that. I just feel like the ward in the ward and the Spectre Shield will give you more value in the short time you have playing the game than the AB.
And you're inherently like making your game plan worse if you're including these non-ward pieces, which is, I mean, something we've just talked about even with Meridian Pathway being in the list.
Yeah, exactly. So just stay off AB. It's not worth it.
So round 1L, you are in the submarine bracket, Andrew. How you feeling at this point?
Yeah, I'm not too worried. I mean, I'm just bringing this deck to have fun. I've tried tinkering it here and there to make it as best as I can, but if it's not my day, it's not my day. So I get Dromai. The matchup is really close. We got down to 1-1, and the only thing that again the card that pushed him over the edge was burn them all because I can't protect my Spectra my ward pieces. So he's constantly taking out a lot of my ward stuff, and on top of that, playing cards like Ravenous Rabble, Blaze Headlong, these natural go again attacks, and then ending it with Snatch, Dust Up, all of these 0-for-4s that are just annoying for me to deal with, and will just chip away at my ward pieces.
Super oppressive in general. So on to round 2. It's important to note that this Arachne I'm displaying is not the Arachne you faced. I imagine you faced Solitary Confinement, yeah?
That's correct, yeah.
And how is that matchup for this list?
It's a lot better. Even though they have, the idea of the stealth to give it go again and try to go wide, their attacks are just not as threatening. They're not usually not throwing around like 4s and stuff like that. It's a lot of 3s or less, especially when they're running Bonds of Agony and Persuasive Prognosis, which only attack for 1. And I have ways to deal with any type of reaction based stuff because this deck is so defensive. It has all the D reacts and war pieces in the world. So if I can I just let my equipment soak up any damage he's trying to put out, and then keep my Spectral Shields and just swing. There are a lot of times where he could not go super wide. There are times to be like just dagger attack. If they were, and that's something that they can like greed for. There were a lot of times where he did not have the go again or a stealth card to go again into a follow-up. So in general, they just cannot pressure you enough to stop you from overloading them with a ward and Spectre Shields.
Absolutely. So Zen is the biggest boogeyman for this deck, probably for a lot of the reasons you described in your round 1 matchup versus Dromai. Just so much damage coming your way. The board can't handle it. You managed to take it from 1 in round 3, though. How did that happen?
Yeah, I got very lucky in my opening hand. I was able to go first. And that's the idea with this deck is you want to try to go first, transcend as early as possible, and get your ward pieces out and swinging Spectral Shields. And I got lucky in that I was able to transcend, but I didn't flip over any of my ward pieces. I actually just played a Mirror Guy with a Shimmers.
Oh my
So
goodness.
it was a very, very ideal start, and I was, I think I was also able to arsenal um a cheat card, or not a cheat card, a defense reaction. So I have the mirror guy out, I have the shimmers out, and I can protect it. Ideally, if I can't protect the shimmers, but I can protect the mirror guy for sure. And mirror guy is such a monster, especially when you start stacking things up on top of it. And yeah, and Zens are also trying to transcend as early as possible. So they're trying to, when they play their blue attacks, it's super inefficient. It's easy for me to deal with. So they could not present enough pressure for me to lose my mirror guy, and I was able to use that to push a lot of damage through, and eventually get an astral etchings on top of it to kind of push, like, edge it closer in my favor. I ended up having a very strong life lead before they were able to go sicko mode on me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that is what helped me take that matchup.
That's awesome. And then the rest of your Swiss, you take down a Reinhardt, you redeem yourself against a Dromai, and then of course hit that quarterfinal against a Zen, and this one went a little bit differently, I guess.
Yeah, they were able to find their transcend cards a lot sooner than me. So it was very easy for them to just uh, double bonds, and especially when if they find ancestral art of war, and just take me out.
Yeah,
It's still
absolutely.
close because I have all of the disruptive cards. I can like stall them out for a turn or two, but sometimes it's just, most of the time it's not enough.
Yeah, which has been very similar to pretty much everybody's experience, both in Blitz and in CC. If you miss that one turn of disruption, it's kind of over. Let's move on to the second skirmish you did last weekend at the Light. This time taking a round one loss to Zen. I'm assuming for similar reasons.
Yeah, it was actually the same. Oh no, it was a different Zen, but yeah. I actually played this Zen in round one and in my quarterfinals match.
And then you're moving on to Blaze, Riptide, and Reinhardt. Talk to me about the Blaze matchup, because one of the things you said before heading to that first skirmish, I believe in our team chat, was like, this deck absolutely demolishes any Blaze you come up against. And that's without having a B, like you mentioned before. How does that work out?
Yeah, so I mean, Blaze can have like these big wide turns, um, and it I mean, you really can't do anything about it. You just take it all. But it's being mindful of when you should be taking the damage, especially when you have the transcend to deal with it. Um, they're they will have like they can have like these explosive turns, but they also need to set up by opting to have these type of explosive turns. And I had I was kind of like waiting in the wins for to flip over my pieces until they had no counters on their hero ability. They needed to re-opt. So once they do, that's when I flip over and get my protection out, because at that point they can't break it with any instant speed stuff, because they need to save their cards to continue to opt and give themselves fuel to be able to deal with it. And Waning Vengeance is just, I park that in the arsenal for the same reason you would do with like an Oasis to try to protect myself. And I would sneak in, and I was using cards like Phantasmaclasm to kind of mess with how they wanted to sculpt their hands, and CNC it for in case they needed, like they wanted to mess with their Stormstrider's targets.
I don't envy that poor Blaze. I mean, when you described it to me, I took Blaze to two skirmishes this weekend, and yeah, I was trembling in my boots trying to avoid you for sure. Sounds like just a nightmare trying to manage your opponent's offensive capability with everything you've got, just because arcane damage is so inefficient unless you're able to like make those consistent connections with your opponent's life total. Anyway, round 3 is a Riptide. You kind of mentioned to us already how that went. Special note, that was against another AGE Open Series competitor and another AGE's Player Championship competitor, Talon Stradley, who looks like just cannot give up on Riptide, whether it's Blitz, whether it's CC. I'm sure if we had a Living Legend tournament, he would find some way to bring Riptide.
It was a really funny deck that he played because it was all traps and only 2 attacks. And he had ways to recur the attacks, but it was only Nourishing Emptiness. So his idea was just recur the Nourishing Emptiness back in as many ways as possible. He ran Strategic Planning to put it back in the deck, Remembrance, and Codex is naturally.
But he's up against you, who is never turning on his traps.
Yes, yeah.
So he's got a full grip of traps, even if the Nourishing hits.
Exactly. So I didn't feel too threatened, knowing that if I let the Nourishing Emptiness hit, he's not going to crack back super crazily in the follow up. So.
And then, of course, in your back pocket, if this game somehow does go a little bit long, is Cosmic Awakening, which you resolve for 20. How many times that weekend, Andrew?
This weekend, 3 times. And I think it is because 1, I'm running all the Transcend cards, and 2, just a 40 card format allows you to see the Cosmic Awakening and 3 Cheese a lot sooner than in any other deck.
So silly.
Yeah, it was a good time.
You're making me want to play this deck. I want to resolve Cosmic for 23 times. That sounds great. So round 4, we take out another Rhinar, which is surprising. I mean, Rhinar is one of the more degenerate decks in this format. You seem to be handling them quite well, though, with Enigma New Moon.
Yeah, so their Intimidate is definitely very threatening, but you can play around it. You still have a lot of instant speed stuff, and you do have a lot of no blocks, but it doesn't matter that much as long as you can flip over your stuff. You're turning 1 card into block 4 at minimum, and in a lot of cases with the equipment pieces, 5 or 7.
Pretty impressive. So, and then, of course, you see another Zen in quarterfinals and lose to him. But we don't need to talk about that anymore, Andrew, because he's gone. So instead, let's forget the past. Let's move to the future. Now, if you want to take this list, which Andrew had a blast with last weekend, even when Zen was in the format, now you've got an extra opportunity. And Andrew has got the tech for you. Andrew, we've thrown a couple of cards into your maybe board that you've been thinking about basically in this fantasy land where Zen doesn't exist. Talk to me about how these cards fit into the list as you've already described it, and what you get to sub out as a result.
Yeah, so the main thing is Special Manifestation. If you guys have watched the AGE Open series, you've seen Tyler play this card in his version of Enigma. And I think now that you have I think the format might slow down enough for you to be able to use this card. Create a Spectre Shield, 3+1/+1 counters if there are no other auras on the board. So this would basically turn your Iris into a swing for 7 off of your Spectral Shield, which is just crazy amounts of damage. Because we can afford to play this card, you can pair it with Restless Coalescence to move those counters, make more Spectral Shields, because ideally you want as many ward cards as possible to swing with your Iris. And in case any of these other pieces go out, you can use this to replenish them back.
And if there's one thing this deck likes to do, it's just create Spectral Shields, right, Andrew?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I bet you're chomping at the bit to get Restless Coalescence into this deck.
Yeah, before it really didn't have a spot. You weren't making +1/+1 counters enough to make this viable, but now we have the space for it. I think it's worth bringing back in.
And since you're making a lot more +1/+1 counters, is there any consideration for Cosmo being the main weapon in this list, or are you pretty happy with Iris and Reality Refractor?
I'm pretty happy with Iris because the mass majority. The main thing is that like Cosmo will pair well with these cards, but it doesn't pair well with your hero ability. So if I think because a lot of your power will come from your hero ability, it's easier to line that up with Iris than it is these cards with
Yeah, a
Cosmo.
super important consideration. I'm sure you could be tempted into running the other weapon, but remembering the core tenets of the deck is always where we should be even when we're brewing up something special, right? Okay, cool. What else? What else you got in here, Andrew? What do you want to talk about?
So the Enigma Chimera and Phantasmal Haze. I think so I had Battle from Bastion in the deck, and that was mainly for Zen, because they're going wide. You use that to, block the weapon and potentially a Tiger or another attack. I think if since a lot of the aggro decks are moving out, these two cards can come in uh, just to push extra damage. They are pummel targets, and I really like Phantasmal Haze for the upside, quote unquote upside of if it gets popped, it gets a spectral shield. So it's either they take 6 damage or they can try to pop it and you get a weapon out of it. So there's really no bad or downside with this card. I'm really happy with trying to add this into the deck. On the topic or on the previous topic of like +1/+1 counters, I'm also looking at stuff like Phantom Tide Maw.
Mm-hmm.
We're making so much ward stuff that it would be really easy to build up counters for this type of card, and you could move it to Restless Coalescence in case you need to let it die, and then just make more Spectral Shields. Or if you can keep both of them around, they stack on top of each other. They can continue to make more counters for Phantom Tide Maw.
Yeah,
After you have
Andrew, I'm picturing an instance where like a KO comes at you with CNC for 7, and you go cool, double transcend, flip over my chess piece, also play Phantom Tide Maw at instant speed, let all of my stuff die, no CNC on hit. Also, Phantom Tide Maw has 7 +1/+1 counters on it. Use the
yeah.
chi to swing Iris. Sounds hilarious.
But think of it like this: you can, if you have Restless Coalescence, you can swing Phantom Tide Maw for 7, and then after that, resolves, instant speed Restless Coalescence, put all the counters on Restless Coalescence, swing it again for all those counters, and then make a Spectral Shield at the end.
Sounds like a lot of fun to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've sold me on Phantom Tide Maw. That sounds like an absolute blast. How about these last two cards? Spectral Prowler, you were telling me, is a really interesting just transcend enabler.
Yeah, because you have so many because you can generate so many Spectral Shields, it seems really easy to have this card online. And it's a go again card. It's a 0 cost, so it plays well into your transcend cards. And if they pop it, you don't mind too much because it's super inefficient to try to pop a 2 attack card with a 6 attack card. And you still get the transcend. You still have the potential to flip over your war pieces. And if you transcend and you don't want to flip over these war pieces, you have other ways to use the transcend cards or the chi rather for stuff like unravel aggression, which I also am considering, because Victor is actually quite a good deck in Blitz. It's very value oriented, especially with Visit the Goldmane Estate.
Mm-hmm.
That card can get pretty nasty. So because we have so much transcend cards, we have a lot. I think this is another way we can use chi to help against that matchup, but also expending 2 cards to get 1 card back, basically a 1 card block 5, I think is a no-brainer.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you, especially if, like you said, the format slows down a little bit and there's less degenerate, quad intimidate or Art of War double bonds kind of stuff going on. You might just have the time to get the immense 1 card 5 value off of this card. Well, when was the last time you got the chance to play half of a skirmish season and then completely change the way the deck works?
Honestly, never. I did play the skirmish season before this when they made a lot of the LL changes, and they were like, and they basically accelerated the living legend status of Kano, Ira, and Kasai. Um, I was playing Kano at the time. I was lucky, or not lucky. I was able to pilot it well enough to get a win off one of the skirmishes, and then it was gone. So I just didn't have a deck to play. Uh, so
So
having
this is the exact
this
opposite for you.
exactly having what's cool I think is that I think this deck is pretty unexplored in general. But it has some strong legs, and I think it's just fun. It's just fun. My favorite thing so far has been to play Cosmic Awakening for 20, and the fact that I have been able to do that 3 times in a weekend, I think says more about how wacky the format is with a 40 card deck and these weird niche pieces uh, that you can just mess with.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, running all of the chi cards means like if you sub in Sacred Art as well, that's a quarter of your deck is chi cards. So the chances of you kind of bricking on chi for the majority of the game seems relatively low.
Yeah, and I actually think Sacred Art might become main board now because the deck, or not the deck, the format is slow enough now for you to be able to actually have the space to play this type of card. Getting 2 extra spectral shields and a +1/+1 counter to everything. If more often than not you're gonna be able to keep your spectral shields after you flip, having this to stack on top of it just is ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean you've convinced me, Andrew. I kind of want to take this deck out for a spin. Let's go ahead and wrap up here, Andrew. Thank you so much for bringing this to our attention and sharing it with the good folks. This is like it breathes new life into skirmish season now that the Zenderman is gone. And you're right. There's a lot to explore here. That's really exciting. Any last things you'd like to say about the deck?
I think it's super fun. I would recommend it to anyone. Um, yeah, who doesn't want to swing for 20?
Nobody. Literally everybody wants to swing for 20. And that makes me happy in general. I think it's not just a personal take of mine, but Blitz feels really fun again. Like, yeah, it's still really quick and games can kind of get out of hand, but also like I've been having way more fun with Blitz than I have in a very long time. And it seems like that's been the case for you as well.
Yeah, I think seeing a lot of these degenerate decks, LL at this point, has given a lot of room for creativity. I think for the format, because they're still pumping out heroes that happen to be a part of the Blitz format, and printing Blitz specific heroes, I think is a great way to revitalize the format. It really has for me, and I think it has for a lot of other people.
That's excellent. I'm glad to hear that. Well, if you want more of Andrew, you can find him next month at the AGE Players Championship that's going to be coming at you on September 29th. Andrew is, I'm sure, going to be coming out swinging. I have absolutely no idea what deck he's going to be on, and I don't want to know because I'm sure whatever it is going to be a lot of fun, and I'm sure he's going to do incredibly well with it. So be on the lookout. And then we're also going to try to convince Andrew to get on the AGE stream team. Any interest, Andrew?
I would love to. I used to stream a lot before I got a job, so happy to get back on that train.
That's amazing. Well, we'll get you set up soon, and then you can start finding Andrew on our YouTube channel, Arcane Games and Events, and join in the party. So thank you so much once again, Andrew, for joining me. Thanks for the unique take on the Blitz format. And I will see you this weekend playing some events, I would imagine.
Hell yeah. I'll see you then.
All right.